I am in Gitchie Manitou Preserve in the northwest corner of Iowa, and like literally the northwest corner because this preserve borders South Dakota. On November 17th, 1973, 5 teenagers came out here to hang out. This was 17-year-old Roger Essam, 18-year-old Stuart Beatty and his 14-year-old brother Dana, 15-year-old Michael Hadrith, and 13-year-old Sandra Chesky. They came out here in Stuart's blue van. They parked it somewhere near the stone ruins, then walked on a trail into the trees until they found an open area and they started a campfire. It's not known exactly where they had their campfire. Obviously the area looks a lot different than it did 50 years ago. To me this looks like it was the most logical spot because there's an opening in the trees and there's a big rock behind it. But granted, most of these trees were a lot smaller 50 years ago, so this might not be the area. But the group started a fire, they hung around it, Roger played his guitar and they smoked weed and just hung out and had a relaxing time. But unbeknownst to them, they were not alone in the preserve that night. The Fryer brothers were also here. Alan, David, and James. Alan and David had just broken James out of jail. They were in the preserve that night poaching deer, and they heard the guitar, so they crept over to a big rock area and spied on the teenagers. And when they saw they were smoking weed, they thought, we'll confiscate the weed. The teenagers then heard some twigs snapping, and Roger stood up and walked a ways away from the group and called out who was there. The Fryer brothers answered by shooting at him and killing him instantly. They fired more shots towards the other teens and they hit Stuart. Michael, Dana, and Sandra then ran into the trees to hide. The Fryer brothers then called out that they were the cops, and Michael asked them, if you're the cops, why are you shooting at us? The Fryer brothers then shot him. The brothers then made the teenagers walk towards their pickup. Alan made Sandra get in the pickup and drove off with her. It wasn't long after that Michael, Stuart, and Dana were killed. Alan drove around with Sandra for a while in Sioux Falls. He even stopped at a gas station at one point and bought them each a pop. He then drove out to an abandoned farmhouse near Hartford, South Dakota, and met up with his brothers. Sandra was surprised that her friends were not with them. It was there that James then got in the pickup with Sandra and raped her. The brothers then discussed what do we do with Sandra, and Alan offered to take care of her. So he drove off again with Sandra, planning to kill her, but then she told him that she was only 13, and as they talked, Alan kind of saw a human side in her. He later said that she reminded him of his stepdaughter, and he couldn't bring himself to kill her. So he asked her where she lived, and he dropped her off at home. But he did threaten her that if she told anybody what they looked like, they would kill her. After Sandra and Alan had left, David and James killed Michael, Stuart, and Dana. It did look like their bodies had been drugged to where they were found, but it was somewhere around this area where they left their bodies. The morning after the murders, a couple from Sioux Falls was test driving a car, and they came out here and discovered the bodies. They drove to the nearest house to call 911 because they didn't have cell phones. The police found Roger's body back closer to where the campfire was. The Fryer brothers were quickly arrested, in part because Sandra had survived and was able to describe what they looked like, and they were all sentenced to life in prison. Some claim this preserve is haunted, in part due to the murders, but also because there's a Native American burial ground on the site. And as you can see, the stone ruins have been heavily covered in graffiti. There's beer cans and bottles and trash everywhere. One place even labeled it Iowa's creepiest park, which is so unfair because this place is gorgeous. The Big Sioux River borders it. There's pretty rock everywhere. And I'm here in October, so the leaves are changing colors, and it is a gorgeous area. Sandra says instead of people looking at it as a haunted place or a place to vandalize, she wishes people would honor the boys instead because she considers them her heroes, because they kept her calm that night, and she thinks if she hadn't stayed calm, she probably would have been killed too. Can you imagine going through that when you're just 13 years old? Sandra obviously did struggle with that, as anyone would, but she is a survivor and she is now a grandmother.